Lyudmila Fedorovna, you look wonderful. Happy, content, smiling? We love it. When you smile, it means you're in a good mood. And when you're in a good mood, all sorts of bright ideas come to your mind. One of those ideas was probably about applied kinesiology. How did this, as they say, come to be in your mind? How did you get acquainted with it? Most people, let's say not everyone probably, but most are familiar with applied kinesiology in Russian through Vasilyeva Lyudmila Fedorovna. And how did Vasilyeva herself learn about it?
You know, it all started with my teachers. I want to reiterate the most important thought, that just as a gardener can grow a rose, only a teacher can nurture a talented person. Weeds grow without teachers. And therefore, my fundamental development came from teachers. Later, from the medical institute, I was in Tomsk, at the Tomsk Medical Institute. It is a remote taiga place of exile for convicts, where all non-traditionally thinking teachers were sent. And we were taught by an old faculty who still spoke French. They taught us independent thinking. They taught us dedication to our work. They taught us patience and how to relate to cadets and their students. And from those times, independent thinking somehow emerged. I was amazed. We had clinical case discussions at the institute where everyone was invited, the faculty, all the teachers, and the students. And first, the students had to make a diagnosis. And from that time, the question arose, why? When I studied neurology, I had questions about why. Such exquisite neurological diagnoses, Alexander, were constructed. It's simply amazing. And the treatment is absolutely the same. And these questions of why demanded some kind of resolution, some kind of thinking. And so I met a new teacher, Professor Kogan, who said, Lyudmila Fedorovna, you have a talent for teaching. As soon as you finish your studies at the institute, we will be waiting for you. I did everything possible to join his department because it was a place of completely independent thinking, where people patiently endure when you ask questions and patiently answer them.
Was his department in Tomsk?
We met him in Tomsk, but he worked in Novokuznetsk. And we met him at a conference when I was still a student, and he invited me to his department. And when I finished my studies, completed my internship, I found the strength and opportunity to come to his department. Then he invited me to a postgraduate program in manual therapy. Can you imagine, in 1981, a postgraduate program in manual therapy? It was absolutely unheard of course. It didn't exist anywhere in the world. And I did everything possible and impossible to submit my documents, quit my job, and move to another city in 3 days.
You really made a radical decision, Lyudmila Fedorovna. And was manual therapy already a specialty at that time, or was it also?
No. It was, manual therapy was practically an unknown field. Just before that, I was with Professor Levitt, the first Russian girl. And I had already started to gain some skills in manual therapy. At that time, there was no specialty yet. The development had just begun. And that's why Professor Kogan invited me, so that we could, as a united team, advance manual therapy. But this is all detailed separately in the anniversary collection of kinesiologists. I think, colleagues, you will take a look and read it.
First, so to speak, you went abroad, then returned, and immersed yourself, or so to speak, started creating manual therapy around you. And how did you come to kinesiology?
The fact is, Professor Kogan always tried to teach us everything new. And we went to a conference dedicated to rehabilitation in medicine. And there were a few Americans who happened to tell us about applied kinesiology. And we caught this knowledge and did everything possible to bring kinesiology to Russia. But it was sad because at the height of organizing the seminar, Kogan left, and we were left alone, kind of orphaned. So we had to take everything into our own hands. You know, the second point I would like to make is that the situation creates the person. If Professor Kogan had been with us, maybe I wouldn't have been so in demand as an organizer, but it turned out that I was left alone, a little girl. I was 35 years old, and I had to either address the issue of kinesiology or not.
To understand, what year was this? What time?
It was It was 1991 when we organized the first seminar. Organizing the seminar was a separate tragedy. I don't even know if it's worth talking about, because when Schaefer agreed to come to us to give a seminar in Siberia, he was negotiating with Professor Kogan and understood that Professor Kogan was a significant figure. But when he found out that Professor Kogan had left, he said, "If Professor Kogan has left you, why should I go to Siberia? If I find a normal person who is willing to voluntarily go to Siberia at their own expense, it's impossible." And so they spent a year persuading him to conduct the seminar. But when he conducted the seminar together with Mr. Christopher Smith, it didn't get any easier because we didn't understand anything. The thing is, they spoke in English. Then it was translated into Russian. Then they were asked questions simply in English. And they couldn't answer any of our questions. We couldn't understand anything because there was no logical explanation. And why is that? The teachers would answer us, "Do as I do, and don't ask questions. You are teachers. You just figure out why." But how are we supposed to learn? Etiology, pathogenesis, nosology. And these words just destroyed all our relationships. That's why the first seminar was just stress. And then I mustered the audacity. I'm directly saying to the camera, the audacity, to write to all the leading specialists in the country with a proposal for them to come to our seminar in St. Petersburg and finally help us understand what exactly we are studying. Everyone knew that I was the secretary of the association, the secretary of the journal Applied Kinesiology, and everyone was interested. They especially liked that the training would be free. And about 23 professors from different regions of the country came to listen to the American specialists. At that time, it was completely new. There were no foreign specialists yet, and there was no teaching in a foreign language. We were somehow blocked. And when they all gathered together, along with Professor Ivanichev, in the evening, after one of the seminars, they said, "Prohibit it, Gis, prohibit it. This is complete nonsense. It doesn't align with neurological science, with our neurological laws. This is just charlatanism. Prohibit it." I still remember how I sat there, neither alive nor dead, and only Professor Isabella Rudolfovna Schmidt said, "Dear friends, kinesiology has already begun its march across Russia. Isn't it better to lead it rather than prohibit it? Because prohibiting it is no longer possible. As a long-serving professor, I tell you, it's better to lead." And so with the blessing of Isabella Rudolfovna, we began to gradually introduce applied kinesiology into manual medicine. And then, with the stage where more and more seminars began, we finally started to understand what it was ourselves. Because applied kinesiology was created by chiropractors and osteopaths. These are people without a medical specialty, and they were not very interested in the neurological aspects of pathogenesis and etiology. But we cannot do without it. We cannot teach testing without explaining why and how. And therefore, when we started teaching, I began writing a doctoral dissertation dedicated to applied kinesiology in order to defend applied kinesiology. And how to defend it? There was no equipment, and I had to conduct research abroad. Part of the research was in Austria, part in Germany, and part in the Czech Republic with Professor Janda. The most amazing thing, which I still can't understand why, is that people were willing to help me. They trained me for free, provided equipment and diagnostics, because my determination was so boundless and my desire to understand so strong that people were willing to help me.
Easier to agree than to refuse, right?
It's better to agree, because a Russian woman, in passionate research, in scientific inquiry, conquers not only the male heart, but also the male mind.
If someone wants to familiarize themselves with your dissertation, how can they find it?
It is available online. I think we'll just post it on our website so it can be viewed. Because in order to defend it, I obtained 6 patents for inventions. But when I submitted my doctoral dissertation in Novosibirsk, they refused to let me defend it. They said, "This dissertation will be rejected in Moscow anyway. So go to Moscow to defend it." And I, a Siberian girl, went to Moscow to defend my dissertation. That's a whole other story. But the defense went brilliantly because why is it a whole other story? Because the reviewers were very uncooperative. They said, in general, we will read your dissertation, and if we don't like it, sorry, we won't even talk to you. And I'm glad they found a way here to evaluate the work and help with the dissertation defense.
This is an interesting point, because essentially at this stage, a new applied kinesiology is being formed in Russia, different from that in the West, in America. Even though we are part of, well, let's say Russian-speaking applied kinesiology, right? Although we are part of the international college, as you mentioned, they focus more on practical skills and actions.
The thing is,
theoretical justifications.
The thing is, chiropractors and osteopaths apply applied kinesiology in a practical sense to their osteopathy and chiropractic. They do not develop it as a separate field, but rather apply it to chiropractic techniques and osteopathic ones. And they are not particularly concerned with the structure itself, the pathogenesis, or the neurophysiological justification. Since we are developing a medical direction, it is an entirely different approach. It's not only important for us to know how to apply it. We need to explain why it works, how it works, and why it is necessary. For example, the pressing issue with neurolymphatic reflexes. In applied kinesiology, in the general standard, they only stimulate neurolymphatic reflexes, and we are trying to understand why the neurolymphatic reflexes are involved. There might be a disruption in lymphatic drainage, or there could be a fixation of the cisterna chyli, or the general lymphatic outflow. In other words, we are trying to use these reflexes as markers of the overall dysfunction of the lymphatic system. Or, for example, some primitive childhood reflexes. They were covered with Miss Tracy, but no one accepted, understood, or teaches this direction anymore. And we not only adopted it, but we also incorporated pediatric neurology and substantiated this approach of influence. That is, thanks to our medical knowledge, deep understanding of anatomy, neurophysiology, pathokinesis, and biomechanics. We try to substantiate, analyze, and ensure that each direction, every step, is clear to the doctor, explaining why we do one thing or another, or a third. And therefore, our approaches differ significantly, creating a new direction, a medical direction. And we call it not applied kinesiology, but medical kinesiology, because we not only teach applied kinesiology, we also study fundamental kinesiology. And the combination of fundamental and applied gives it the medical designation.
Yes, it's interesting, and it's important to highlight these aspects in the difference between applied and medical kinesiology, and essentially the features of kinesiology development in our conditions, so to speak, in our realities.
The difference in medical kinesiology is that we not only explain the techniques, but also justify them. Why this technique is effective, when it is used, and most importantly, the possible complications and potential directions. And the most important thing, in standard kinesiology, which exists worldwide, each instructor teaches their own approach. We are exhausted. Everyone who trained with Schaefer, with Lever, with Miss Tracy, with Stosser, each provides their own teaching technique, diagnostic technique, manual muscle testing technique, and they mix with each other. Yet each has something new. And we took the most essential ideas from each instructor and are now integrating them to the fullest. Because we have no desire to elevate ourselves above anyone. We want to take the best of everything and make kinesiology fast, effective, precise, and not complicated. Moreover, thanks to the medical approach, we are developing a new direction in kinesiology that is unknown in the world, and which we lovingly nurture and observe the results. Because the medical mind is distinguished by its ability to answer the question, why? And for what purpose? Why does this work? And how will it not work? And by answering these questions, new ideas are created, which are constantly integrated into applied kinesiology, into our training program. Now I want to address all our colleagues. We have completely revised our training program, adding new medical technologies, including those of Mr. Chris, Mr. Schaefer, electromagnetism, and Miss Tracy. But we don't just combine them, we base it on a neurophysiological approach to forming the reflex activity of the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. Because visceral therapy, which is taught in standard applied kinesiology at Isaac, is not considered at all. It doesn't exist as a concept. And we not only consider visceral therapy, but we also apply the autonomic nervous system as a conduit system for both visceral impulses. An applied understanding of the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and metasympathetic systems. We discuss the vagus nerve in detail, and we discuss in detail the segmental levels of sympathetic nervous system lesions. And then it turns out to be not the applied kinesiology that is traditionally taught, but rather a new kinesiology. It is called medical because at present, simply telling a doctor to push here, and it will be good, is not enough. The doctor cannot understand this. You need to explain why it needs to be pushed, what the purpose is, what the result will be, and what complications might arise, and how to prevent these complications. Or, for example, hyperfacilitation. It is not studied at all in medical applied kinesiology, and we cannot take a step without hyperfacilitation, even though it is a technique by Sheldon Deal. It is not used in standard kinesiology at all, yet we apply it extensively, along with the ionization system and many other technologies. And the most amazing thing is that we are constantly learning, gaining new knowledge from our teachers, and acquiring new insights from our patients. And since we have an academy with about 20 doctors, we constantly mix with each other, integrate into one another, watch seminars, and there is always, a powerful growth of the teaching staff. And you will see that if you come to the next seminar, you simply won't recognize your teacher, because we constantly have certification councils, a certification commission. We integrate with each other all the time, and the program changes every time. Because kinesiology is a feedback system with the external environment. The external environment has changed, the teaching has changed, the techniques have changed. There is nothing stable in kinesiology. It's like a wave. It comes, takes information from the environment, and launches it inside. And we all process the new information together. I apologize for talking so much.
Irina Fyodorovna, well, we are here to listen to you, so we are listening with pleasure. We'll return to the history a bit later. To focus on this moment now, I just want you to clarify this point, because very often, representatives of applied, or in our country, medical kinesiology, are criticized for how we can study this when everything is constantly changing. We did this and got that result, but tomorrow we do the same thing and get a different result.
My friends, the person themselves, the patient, is constantly changing. You see, the patients coming in now are different from those 20 or 40 years ago. They have different demands, different complaints, different issues. And we must learn to understand what the patient is coming with in order to adequately help them. We do not cling to our dogmas. We follow the development of the universe and the development of humanity. And that is why it is very important. The most important thing in applied kinesiology, in medical kinesiology, is not to learn the techniques, but to learn to think. We encourage every patient and every student to think, because only a thinking person can help themselves. And in kinesiology, it is very important not just to treat the patient, but to teach them to think differently so that they take responsibility for their health. And therefore, technologies will change every time. And this is our pride, because we are adaptable, we are dynamic, we are mobile, and we always respond adequately to external influences and demands. That is precisely why we are so successful.
Lyudmila Fedorovna, we have, so to speak, a big anniversary of applied kinesiology approaching. You, as the founder, as one of the founders, as the person who conducted the first seminar on kinesiology, what do you think? The foundation of applied kinesiology in Russia, the year, so to speak, of its foundation, establishment, which year can be considered?
The training system as the establishment of kinesiology began in 1991. The official association organizes applied kinesiology, in which I was the president. It was founded in 1995. Therefore, I don't know how best to direct it, as educational or as organizational. There are two possibilities. Decide for yourself.
We have formed, through your efforts and direction, the Interregional Association of Applied Kinesiology as part of the International College of Applied Kinesiology. And since 1995, it has existed. You were president for a long time. And conferences on applied kinesiology were held under the auspices of the Interregional Association. And in 2024, we will be holding the 30th anniversary conference. What does that mean? 30 years? That is, yes, since the formation or since the conferences began. We all love round numbers. How do we orient ourselves with these round numbers?
The thing is, we started organizing conferences on applied kinesiology even before having an officially registered association. The registration process is not an easy path, and those who have organized and registered an association understand how difficult it is. But we had already started holding events, we organized conferences before our registration began. It was an informal gathering of people, unregistered. But the conferences were held and were very successful. And this is indeed the 30th conference. Because as soon as we received knowledge in 89 from our teachers, we immediately organized a conference, gathered everyone who was there, and tried to analyze with each other how, why, and what works. We invited all the specialists to our association in the academy. At that time, it wasn't an academy, but rather the Department of Neurology at the Novokuznetsk Institute for Advanced Medical Training. And we introduced everyone around, and that was already the first beginning of the conference. But there was no registration of the association yet. When we reached more than 600 people in our society, we started thinking about registration.
So in the coming years, we have such promising prospects for the anniversary.
That's wonderful. An anniversary is a summing up, an analysis of the path taken, an analysis of past mistakes, and a program for the future. Therefore, an anniversary is wonderful.
In 2025, it will be 30 years since the association was organized.
30 years of organizing the association.
Anniversary of Lyudmila Fedorovna Vasilyeva.
And my anniversary, that's true.
Of course, big plans. So plan for the year 25 in advance. Anyone who is connected with applied kinesiology, you will have many reasons to participate in various events.
And I also want to remind you, you all know that we have an anniversary collection, How We Became Kinesiologists. And in it, anyone who wishes, students who have gone through their journey from the beginning of their training, then the start of treatment, development, and so on, can write. If you have the desire to write something for our collection, we are always happy to hear from you, to see your photos. Because over 30 years, we have trained a huge number of people. If you have the desire to say something, to analyze the path you have taken, we would be very grateful, because the second volume is being prepared on how we became kinesiologists. Read what the guys wrote in the previous edition, and write, because Applied Kinesiology creates history varieties, thanks to you. We have no dogmas. We have a lively, energetically filled education. And therefore, any of your emotional outbursts will help us all rise higher.
Lyudmila Fedorovna, a couple of words. Maybe let's go back a bit. The 90s are generally assessed, as we have formed the opinion, as the turbulent 90s, right? Some kind of timelessness, lack of control. Maybe it was for the better in the development of applied kinesiology, or did it hinder? How did it all happen in the very beginning?
It all starts with teachers. I want to say once again, my friends, everything starts with the teachers. From the early school years, from the early student years, we were taught independence of thought and the search for optimal solutions. Starting from the first year, we clinically analyzed patients, which seemed impossible, but we did it. Therefore, when it was realized that this direction, which we heard about in the first seminar, is very important, promising, and provides answers to many questions, the task was set on how to develop it. And therefore, all efforts, all energy, all desires, all time, at the expense of my family, my husband, my child, were directed towards attracting as many people as possible who could potentially implement this program. And during the turbulent early 90s, when there was a lack of authority, there was an opportunity, given the political situation at the time, to create a direction that became independent. And I am happy that I was in Siberia at that time, because Siberia is far away. Beyond Siberia, no one would be sent, and we could avoid creating an independent direction. And thanks to the fact that there were many teachers and professors exiled to Siberia, a kind of intellectual center was formed, where people enriched, integrated, and strengthened each other. And we were not afraid of anything because we were very far from the capital. Even when, in 1989, specialists from America came for an exchange of experience, Professor Samorukov Alexei Egorovich brought Professor Kogan's team to tell them something interesting. And so the whole team came, and even then we were more independent. We even watched and spoke independently. And because there was no sense of fear, no sense of caution, but a fierce desire to create something new, important, and necessary for everyone. It somehow washed away all boundaries. And so when we went somewhere to ask or propose something, it was so passionate, unexpected, and new that people, just in case, tried not to interfere. We didn't expect help from anyone. We just asked people not to interfere with us. But if kinesiology had started to develop not in Siberia, but somewhere in Moscow or St. Petersburg, it probably wouldn't have worked out.
Lyudmila Fedorovna, as I understand it, the first students and the most passionate followers were the medical communities.
Only medical communities, because when we started developing applied kinesiology, we had courses for training doctors in manual therapy. And we only trained doctors at the very beginning, and therefore, the doctors we trained are taught to boldly ask questions. They asked us questions that we were forced to find answers to, because you can't just not answer a student's question. And so we gathered as a whole team and searched for neurophysiological aspects in order to provide answers. Therefore, only doctors were trained. But over time, we realized that a doctor alone cannot fully provide therapeutic effects on a patient, because there are many technologies that can be brilliantly used in the hands of massage therapists. And so we created an entire program for training massage specialists. But then time passed and we realized that massage alone was not enough. A system of dynamic retraining is needed, static retraining. And we turned to kinesiofitness and created a kinesiofitness program. Because it's not enough to just treat a person. It's not enough to tell them how to act. It's also necessary to teach them to breathe correctly, to walk correctly, to bend correctly. And this entire program of motor and static rehabilitation is led by the kinesiofitness system. Therefore, I always advise, dear doctors, if you are planning to come to us go for training, find your massage therapists, find your kinesiotherapy fitness specialists, so that you can fully take the entire program from the doctor to the massage therapist and to the kinesiotherapist to be able to comprehensively help the patient. Because if you haven't taught the patient to walk, including the gluteus maximus muscle, the effect of working on it will be minimal. It is necessary to teach the patient for a long time to move correctly, breathe correctly, think correctly, speak correctly, and use their motor skills correctly. Because during the illness, the human body completely restructures itself, and the person gets used to working under limitations. You have removed the limitations, but the person has forgotten how to use them.
Lyudmila Fedorovna, there are two opinions, completely opposite. Who can be trained? Who can be taught applied kinesiology? Some say that it should only be medical professionals, at the very least, with a program of medical knowledge, meaning at least a secondary specialized medical education. There is another opinion, the opposite, that anyone can study kinesiology, that it is not some kind of specialized medical knowledge, and that people with different educational backgrounds can also learn it. What do you think? What is your opinion on this matter? Who can be trained? Who can be taught applied kinesiology?
The question is both yes and no. Kinesiology is a vast body of knowledge. If you are a doctor and you come to applied kinesiology, you attend courses designed for doctors. You are taught neurophysiology, the specifics of anatomical structures and their interactions, biomechanics, and pathobiomechanics. You are trained to make a kinesiological diagnosis and to write a program for kinesiological health restoration. This is one teaching technique, one direction in kinesiology. The second training is kinesiotherapy massage. This is a specialist who receives a program created by a doctor and is trained to work with trigger points, fascial shortening, myofascial chains, and the stabilization of static and dynamic states. The third level is kinesiotherapy massage therapists. We teach them the diagnostic algorithm, the suboptimal movement pattern, flexion or extension of the torso, how to properly work with muscles, which ones to load, and in what mode. But there is a fourth option. This is Kinesia Life, where we train specialists without formal education, teaching them how to maintain their health in everyday life.
It's not even specialists, but it turns out
It's people,
any person.
it's anyone who wants to know, how can I restore my health? How can I support my vitality? How can I achieve emotional stabilization? And we teach people how we teach the laws of life. Because we are taught to read, taught to write, taught to speak, but not taught how to live correctly, how to properly manage our energy resources, how to move correctly, how to eat properly, how to breathe correctly. And we don't just teach by gathering knowledge, but by integrating it into a holistic, comprehensive system. You can simply get acquainted with the Kinesia Life system online. Therefore, anyone who would like to study kinesiology will find their niche, where their training system will be conducted according to their level of knowledge and needs.
I think we've clarified everything, because a more comprehensive answer from Professor Vasilyeva, who, as we've already discussed, is indeed the founder of kinesiology in Russia, well, I think there's probably nothing more to add. Lyudmila Fedorovna, you mentioned. You said that Siberia is the best place to develop something new, as they won't send you further than Siberia. So why then? How did you end up in Moscow? Why did you decide to move, so to speak, to the capital?
The thing is, when I received the title of professor, I realized that in Siberia you can develop, but to register, to officially implement, to document it, this needs to be done in Moscow. And that's why I moved to Moscow with some of my colleagues. Thanks to Professor Fedin Anatoly Ivanovich, he helped me organize a paid course in traditional medicine under his department. Then we created a separate department, and later renamed it to the Department of Manual Therapy. And so, within the framework of the State Medical University, this direction developed and expanded. And thanks to this, we were able to obtain the documents that you are now using.
Lyudmila Fedorovna, how do you see the state of applied kinesiology at the moment in Russia? To what extent is it a science, an art, a medical direction, or a rehabilitation direction? What do you think applied kinesiology, what is it? Is it a direction of science, or is it an art? Or is it rehabilitation techniques, or is it a way of life? How do you relate to this, and how can we position it, so to speak, in the broad informational field?
Probably, applied kinesiology can be interpreted from different positions. Applied kinesiology is a multi-format direction. Firstly, it is a scientific direction that explains the gaps that exist in science before its arrival. You all surely remember the scientific developments of Nikolai Alexandrovich Einstein about the fact that in any movement there are two phases, the isometric and the isotonic phase, which are regulated differently, react differently, and recover differently. But after his research, there was a long break in scientific work and Sunday, and studies emerged suggesting that one should work with shortened muscles, knead and stretch shortened muscles, perform blockades. And a question arose, which is only answered by applied kinesiology. Why? When a nerve is compressed, does hypotonia, hyporeflexia, and hypesthesia always occur in the muscle? And compensatorily, the antagonist muscles shorten. And we only work with shortened muscles, not finding hypotonia, no one could answer this question. Because functional disturbances in muscle tone during movement can only be determined with new tools, Shamomei manual muscle testing. The second question that science could not solve until applied kinesiology appeared. Why does a person experience neck pain only when sitting, and it disappears when standing? Or only when standing and when sitting? That is, there are many questions currently being addressed in kinesiology that are an invaluable contribution to the scientific understanding of the musculoskeletal system. I'm not even mentioning the autonomic nervous system. The fact that you can work on the segmental level of the sympathetic nervous system, on the parasegmental level, and that you can eliminate levels of compression of the vagus nerve. This is what constitutes a significant contribution to science from the side of applied kinesiology. On the other hand, it is an art. Because thanks to the various knowledge that a doctor brings to kinesiology, they use it in different ways. An orthopedic traumatologist focuses more on the musculoskeletal and ligament joint system, while a neurologist focuses more on neurological aspects. A pediatrician focuses more on children's primitive reflexes. And therefore, every specialist who masters the standard of kinesiology still finds its application closer to the specialty in which they work. Therefore, it is both an art and rehabilitation. Because when a person has suffered any kind of injury, neurological, physical, psychological, they require rehabilitation. But rehabilitation must be individualized. It is very difficult to understand what exactly this person needs for recovery. And here, by using manual muscle testing as a feedback system, one can suggest which rehabilitation program is more optimally necessary for this particular patient. For example, the same primitive reflexes that occur in patients after strokes are simply diagnosed as such, but they are not worked with, even though they can be addressed. And it is possible to find where the level of closure of this reflex is, how to restore this affected segment of the spinal or brain, and what needs to be done for this. This knowledge exists, and we are ready to provide it in any quantity. This is necessary for the individual as well, because when we teach our patients and those who wish to improve their health about proper breathing, proper nutrition, proper biomechanics of walking, and the correct integration of primitive reflexes into complex movements, the person becomes healthier. But this is also necessary for the massage therapist, because if a massage therapist knows the basics of differential diagnosis of somatic autonomic nervous system disorders, they will never perform a massage on a person whose autonomic nervous system is affected, because they know it will lead to an exacerbation. This is very important, and this knowledge is necessary for kinesiotherapists, because if a person has relaxed and hypotonic rectus abdominis muscles due to a non-functioning small intestine, and they are given exercises for these muscles, it leads to abdominal muscle separation and compression from the internal organs. If the massage therapist and kinesiotherapist know this, they will never make these mistakes. Kinesiology is fortunate in that it does not interfere with any knowledge a person has. It simply helps, complements, and advises. Here this is correct, and here it is undesirable to do. And here, wait. Therefore, manual muscle testing and the system of provocative diagnostic methods are invaluable contributions to the fields of medicine, massage, kinesiotherapy, and in helping each patient. I teach patients. If you stand up, palpate your muscles, and experience pain, please sit down. If the pain disappears when you sit down, it means the problem is in one of your legs, either the right or the left. Look at which leg has the issue, and perform exercises with each leg. The most basic, popular, and accessible advice helps us free our medical work from those patients who can help themselves. And the most important thing we instill in our trainees, in our patients, we are all responsible for our own health, each one of us. We go to the doctor not for them to cure us, but for them to guide us on how we can restore our own health. Because emotional state, digestive state, motor state, All of these are within the resources of the individual.
I'll return to another question, a serious one. In my opinion, perhaps the most serious question. According to statistics, both in the academy and in, let's say, other institutions, training, seminars and courses on applied kinesiology, very few doctors attend, at least fewer than non-specialists. And in percentage terms, perhaps few attend because there are fewer doctors than all the others. So it's clear here, yes, that there are absolutely fewer of them, which is why fewer attend. But in percentage terms, those who continue to study kinesiology adopt it and fully integrate it into their lives. The percentage of doctors is much smaller than that of massage therapists or other fields. How do you explain this? What is the problem? What needs to change in the approach, in thinking, or in organization? What do you think?
The fact is that a doctor has certain instructions. A step to the right, a step to the left, execution.
Yes.
That is, he must provide the standard of medical care for which he is responsible. Whether it helps the patient or not, that's secondary. But he is obliged to provide the standard of medical care. And independent thinking is not very suitable here. For a doctor to realize that he needs kinesiology, he must make many mistakes in his medical practice. He must realize that what he is doing is not enough, and only then is he ready to learn. Not everyone has independent thinking. For many, it's more convenient to follow the prescribed standard. And that's why we value every doctor who comes to us, because we know if a doctor comes to us, it's independent thinking. It's quite a lot of experience. And usually we make such specialists our educators. Because even for a massage therapist, it's very important that the instructor is a doctor, as they can help ensure the safety of the massage therapist's medical practice. Therefore, if there are doctors listening to me and they are ready to learn new knowledge, we are always happy to teach you, because we have amazing training programs for you. I think the time will come and the system will change when more doctors will be trained, because when a doctor makes medical mistakes while following a program, they create their own little cemetery. And at some point, this cemetery starts to weigh on the heart. So please, dear colleagues, if you feel that you need new knowledge, you can attend our courses. Don't have time. For courses, you can watch our videos for free at any time. You can watch our video materials from the comfort of your home. But every doctor, no matter how busy they are, must learn something new and take a look. What new things can I learn for myself? The third, perhaps important reason is that our doctors are very overloaded. No one works just one job, working 1.5 or 2 jobs. They take on new night shifts. Imagine, a person hasn't slept all night providing medical care, and in the morning they go to work. They are not up for anything. They either have to survive in this direction. So if you are ready to change something in your life, we are happy to help you. But only when you are ready. You cannot teach someone anything if they are not ready for that learning themselves. Only when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
A very interesting and important phrase. Continuing this thought, I want to ask, do you think that anyone can become a kinesiologist, or not everyone?
Unfortunately, kinesiology is a chosen specialty. To become a kinesiologist, you first need to change your mindset. You need to learn to ask yourself questions. Why? For what purpose? How? Why isn't it working? You need to learn to think differently. Secondly, you need enough perseverance to master new knowledge, because kinesiology is practically a new specialty. This is not an addition to your specialty, it is a new specialty, and you need to approach it with full responsibility. And thirdly, you need to be emotionally ready to overcome fear, overcome anger, and overcome the star syndrome in order to learn and learn step by step. Therefore, kinesiology is like a marker. It selects specialists according to its level. There are people who come only to the first seminar just to get acquainted. I understand that this is a futile endeavor because it is impossible to learn kinesiology in just one seminar. It is learned throughout a lifetime. First, kinesiology teaches you, then you teach kinesiology, and then you develop together with it. Because kinesiology is about development. And not everyone is ready for development. There are people who have a certain ceiling in their intellectual and developmental process, beyond which they cannot leap. And everyone must understand this. I tell the cadets every time you come to the first seminar, your first task is to understand whether this is your direction or not. If it's not for you, leave immediately. Not because I want to attract or reject everyone, but because I need each person to understand internally. People are not used to talking to themselves. People are not used to feeling their heart, their inner voice. People are not used to listening to themselves. People are used to living by standards. If a person lives by standards, they will not master kinesiology.
Why do you think many of those who attended the first seminar and, as you say, felt it wasn't for them, not only leave, but unfortunately later on start to, let's say, the harsh word criticize, I'm not sure how applicable it is here, but in any case they speak unfavorably about this direction and somewhat belittle it?
There are several reasons for this. Reason number one. The students who come for training are in a state of hyperfacilitation, and they cannot feel the manual muscle testing. That is, they have a number of somatic vegetative disorders that prevent them from learning, and therefore they cannot feel the change in muscle tone during different phases of manual muscle testing. We usually identify such students and suggest they undergo a treatment process first and only then. Proceed with the training, but they do not have time to complete the treatment process while in the training process, and therefore they do not manage to immediately master manual muscle testing. The second option. There is nothing easier than elevating oneself by criticizing something more important. This is a system of sort of elevating one's own status. I don't understand. So you are fools too. The third option is the onset of a star syndrome, where a person believes they understand everything, know everything, can do everything, and what others do, which is inaccessible to them, is negative. A person simply tries to promote themselves through negativity towards what they do not know and do not understand. And this is inevitable. But I always say to such statements, if they spit on your back, it means you're ahead.
Great saying. Let's continue. With the idea of gradual development, yes, step-by-step development. It all started in Siberia, in Novokuznetsk. Again, you came to Tomsk from Kazakhstan, right? So you started your...
I was living in Kazakhstan and trying to find an institute that suited me best. I first went through Omsk, then Novosibirsk, then Tomsk. I really like Tomsk. It's a very beautiful city. There are such huge cedars growing there, and such a university. The medical institute is very rich. There, academics start teaching students from the third year. Not professors, academics. Can you imagine? It's such a rich layer. Because when an academic teaches, they do it with such passion. I remember a microbiologist taught us, that was already 60 years ago. It's indescribable. And that's why such a constellation of professors, there's just a star-studded iconostasis. And that's why I stayed in Tomsk.
So Kazakhstan, Siberia, Moscow, now Dubai. What brought you to Moscow, you told us? What brought you there? And what pushed you further?
The thing is, due to my intensive activities in medical, teaching, and scientific fields, I somehow started to feel like I was missing the sun. Because in Moscow we only have sun in the summer. It's not there in winter, spring, or autumn. And my vitamin D levels were constantly dropping. And when the pandemic situation arose, with the possibility of remote learning, I thought I can be in another place. a healthier place for my well-being. I always dreamed of living by the sea, so I moved with the goal of continuing my teaching activities, but online. And the second reason I wanted to stay here is that we have already widely implemented applied kinesiology in Russia and Europe, but it's practically non-existent in the East. In the United Arab Emirates, it's practically non-existent. And I am making a great effort now. We have the Dubai Association of Applied Kinesiology, and I am making every possible effort for kinesiology to develop here as well, so that it becomes the medicine of the planet. That's why I conduct seminars here in Dubai, which gather specialists from 25 to 30 countries. And we conduct international seminars that allow me to both integrate applied kinesiology into Dubai and gather specialists from around the world who currently cannot be in Russia to improve their health. Because I believe that when you go and try to develop a certain direction, you are responsible for your own health. I am responsible for my health. I am in an environment that allows me to speak with you now with a powerful, energetic message.
And one of the aspects is that Dubai is a developing country. Everyone talks about how in the airport and everywhere in the hotels there are before and after photos, as they say. We all love these before and after photos. 25 years ago there was a desert. Now there are skyscrapers, highways, a huge number of tourists, and many people relocating. And as far as I know, Dubai's goals are set for several decades ahead. And one of the goals is to be the #1 country for medical tourism. This is documented. It's in the Ministry of Development. And I think that the invitation of Professor Vasilyeva is probably one of the steps towards achieving this goal.
Yes, we are doing everything possible to integrate applied kinesiology into medical practice. That's true. Therefore, we will do everything possible with the combined efforts of our entire team of Dubai kinesiologists to ensure that this field spreads as widely as possible across the eastern regions of our planet.
Lyudmila Fedorovna, a few questions about the future. How do you see the future of applied kinesiology? Let's start with an overall perspective. And the second part of this question is, how do you see the future of applied kinesiology formally in medicine? That is, do we need to introduce the specialty of applied kinesiologist like a manual therapist, gynecologist, or ENT specialist, or is it unnecessary? How much will this help development, or on the contrary hinder us? Because you yourself have talked about the standards and limitations that it imposes on the specialist. Maybe we should leave the situation as it is now, where applied kinesiology is, well, a free direction and not restricted by formal frameworks? Or should we still integrate into the formal healthcare system?
The most optimal development of applied kinesiology, medical kinesiology, I see within the framework of medical rehabilitation. This is a new direction that is currently developing intensively. And I am a professor at the Kazan Medical Academy in the Department of Sports Medicine and Medical Rehabilitation. And already within this department, we are now teaching applied kinesiology to medical rehabilitators. But I see directions in applied kinesiology and in the art of massage as its branch, which is developing. We are now going to hold as many conferences as possible, presenting reports at massage, conferences to promote it. I see this direction in kinesi fitness and in sports medicine because we have held many conferences at the Ministry of Sports and see great successes in sports. I see it in the direction and in the popularization direction. Therefore, kinesiology kind of encompasses all directions of medical activity, human activity, and it can be applied to any knowledge anywhere. It's like water, it's everywhere, it exists everywhere, but it's not visible. That is, we are made of water, but no one sees it. Therefore, it will be not such a permeation into all directions. But as a medical specialty, I don't think it needs to be made separate. I think it will develop within the framework of medical rehabilitation, because they're all specialists from different fields are gathered into a single team. And there, the direction of medical rehabilitation itself is towards health restoration. And health restoration is impossible without medical kinesiology.
Elena Fedorovna, back in the day when I worked at the Medical Center of Kinesiology, which is in principle a unique institution, because as you already mentioned, when specialists come to educate, each speaks from their own, so to speak, perspective. Similarly, clinical work is also being done abroad by kinesiologists. Everyone opened their own little office and isolated themselves from others. But you, besides the academy and the educational direction, also opened a clinical center where you gathered all specialists who work together. In this center, there are letters of gratitude displayed, an assessment of the contribution of applied kinesiologists in training athletes. How effective is this in sports? How necessary is an applied kinesiologist in teams? Or is it not needed? Or can some tools simply be taken and integrated into the existing medical practice in sports teams?
That's true. At the very dawn of applied kinesiology development in Moscow, we created a clinical medical center where about 20 doctors worked together. And when our American colleagues visited us, they said that this medical center was unique. Nowhere in the world is there a medical center where kinesiologists work together. Everyone works in a small closed office so that no one else can see, hear, or understand what we are doing. But we had a different goal. Our goal was mutual integration, the development of practical standards for the application of applied kinesiology among doctors of different specialties. And that's why we conducted joint analyses. When several kinesiologist specialists gathered together and analyzed cases jointly, other doctors joined me in this process. And so the goal was different, integration. And many doctor trainees, upon completing their studies at the academy, came to work with us at the medical center to hone their skills under the guidance of leading specialists. And when athletes gradually started coming to us, having accumulated a certain amount of knowledge, we approached the Ministry of Sports to express our desire to hold a conference, to introduce all the coaching staff to the developments we had achieved while working with individual athletes. We conducted a series of medical conferences and prepared several specialists who were integrated as kinesiologists into the teams. The team that is training takes on a kinesiologist, and he works with them. And to this day, many teams have kinesiologists, specialists, in every coaching club, including football clubs and cycling groups, clubs. And this still exists to this day. Therefore, when we received a large number of awards at one of the Olympics, the Minister of Sports signed us such letters of gratitude for the contribution we made to sports medicine. And to this day, since then, we have had professors who teach sports medicine, and you can get acquainted with courses that teach this synthesis of sports medicine and applied kinesiology.
What prospects or challenges do you see in the development of applied kinesiology? What should be focused on in the near future? And what is the long-term goal, let's say in the next year and in 20 years, so to speak? These problems are surely different, right? There are always some local obstacles, and there are more global UBU obstacles. What is the problem at this stage, and what problem do you see in the future?
Currently, the main problem is that research work is needed because the specialists who are trained with us are mostly practical doctors, and we need scientific workers. And we had a trend where a specialist who is officially registered as a teacher in some department studies with us for free. Why? So that in the future scientific research can be conducted. We need scientific research to confirm our effectiveness in various aspects and directions. And we are ready to offer PhD dissertations. If there are those interested in developing in this direction, we are always ready to offer, because the more scientific confirmations of the effectiveness of applied kinesiology we have, the more and faster it will integrate.
The nearest?
The nearest. And in the future, I hope that departments of medical kinesiology will be opened in medical universities, where it can be taught as a separate field for doctors of various specialties, medical faculties will be opened in institutes of physical education and sports, because there are faculties in the Institute of Physical Education and Sports, but they very dryly talk only about standards, but do not discuss pathology. That is what the standard should be, what the standard should be. And if the standard is not met, what should be done about it? Therefore, we, addressing the Institute of Physical Education, offer our training programs in order to implement a training system for the coaching staff as well.
We have talked a lot with you now about history, about the present, and in general about the future. I would like to make a suggestion rather than ask a question, yes? What question would you like to answer that I haven't asked you?
Am I happy?
Lyudmila Fedorovna, are you happy?
Yes.
That's an excellent answer, a splendid answer. And
I am happy because I see that what I started is being continued by many colleagues. I see that my work, my energy, my desire to implement, it is developing further and further. I see that there is a medical center built, which is operational. I see that there are medical centers in other countries, in other cities. I see that there are academies in our country, that there are other schools that led by my colleagues. I see that what I started with such heavy, titanic effort has a direction, and now I am happy because I can peacefully engage in creativity, as 40 books have been written. Now I can write the 41st book. When I give lectures, I no longer teach the introductory seminars. I conduct more advanced seminars because I know that my colleagues handle the introductory ones. So every time I wake up in the morning, I thank the universe for giving me such a gift and ask what else I can do, what strengths I have to optimize and further develop this direction. Because I understand that only through this approach can we more effectively help any patient who wants to be healthy. And there are more and more of them now. They are looking for these answers to their questions on the internet. So visit our website, kinesioprofi.ru. You will read, you will watch, you will study Kinesio Life for patients, Applied Kinesiology for doctors, fitness trainers, and massage therapists. All available for free, many clinical case studies. Try to learn on your own, and then you will be happy and successful.
together with Professor Vasilyeva.
Together with Professor Vasilyeva.
And in conclusion of our conversation, Lyudmila Fedorovna, I want to ask, who could we name? Maybe one, maybe two, maybe three, but not a dozen. Still, to narrow it down a bit to people, personalities, or maybe events, or perhaps some books that influenced you as a person, as a specialist, as an individual, to whom you would like to say thank you, and note that if it weren't for him at that moment, or her, or it, or something, but you would be a different person.
If it weren't for Professor Koganon Grigorievich, I wouldn't have started my study of manual therapy. And if it weren't for Professor Levit Karlegonovich, who accepted me and helped me develop in various directions, I wouldn't have been able to achieve success in manual therapy. If it weren't for Professor Janda from Prague, the professor of the rehabilitation department, I wouldn't have been able to complete my doctoral dissertation because he was my academic advisor. If it weren't for the books, the cat of Nikolai Alexandrovich Bernstein, I wouldn't have been able to understand why and how manual muscle testing works. Because only the two phases of muscle contraction described by him allowed me to understand the logic behind the construction of manual muscle testing. If it weren't for Professor Magidovich, I would never have understood why there is an interaction, a connection between muscles and an internal organ. It's not enough to just say it. You need to find scientific documents that confirm this effectiveness. And that's why the books by Mikhail Romanovich Magidovich on visceral motor reflexes are simply amazing. I just advise you, if it weren't for the professor who studied pediatric neurology, pediatric traumatology, we wouldn't understand the significance of vegetative primitive reflexes for human life, because old age doesn't begin when wrinkles appear. Old age begins when the first signs of primitive reflexes appear. And everyone needs to know this. You need to know how to diagnose it, how to restore it, and how to implement it. If it weren't for Professor Fedin Anatoly Ivanovich, I wouldn't have been able to move to Moscow. This is a big fundamental layer for me, Professor Alexei Gorek-Samorukov, because without him, we would never have met Sheffer, would not have come to Moscow for this conference, and many, many others about which I wrote in the anniversary collection either, where I described each author, told their stories. Please read it, because many people have contributed their knowledge, efforts, and opportunities to our development.
Yes, of course, Lyudmila. Fedun, you can't list everyone. I understand that the number of people, both great and ordinary, that you have encountered throughout your life is enormous. That's why we're trying a little bit, yes, to limit it. Tell me, regarding personalities, you've mentioned, is there any literature, a book of general philosophy, or universal human interest that resonates with applied kinesiology, which perhaps people should study, read, or pay attention to, for those who are developing in this direction, so to speak?
Well, there's a very new book that I'm currently reading and researching in detail. It's the book Karma Logic by Alexei Sitnikov, which allows one to philosophically look at many questions and understand why and how we should properly build our lives to be in harmony with the entire universe. He has gathered all the universal laws, integrated them, and it resulted in very interesting literature. I'm enjoying reading it right now.
He's our contemporary. And what about someone from the past? Thinkers, philosophers?
No one compares to Lao Tzu. His philosophical views amaze me, and I always incorporate his thoughts when I conclude my lectures.
Like a favorite quote, a favorite saying as a parting word, a bright conclusion to our rich conversation?
Well, for example, the time for positive changes starts from within. To stand still, you have to run very fast, because everything is developing and everything is in progress. If you have stopped, it means you have gone backward.
Thank you.
That's why I try to fill each of my lectures, each of my presentations, with new knowledge, new information. That's why my lectures are unique. Watch more often and fill yourself with the knowledge that I gladly, lovingly, and gratefully share with you. I love you all very much, and I'm proud to live in this time with such amazing people, with such wonderful, sensitive, and understanding souls. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Lyudmila Fedorovna. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your emotions. I feel like I've known Professor Vasilyeva for a long time, but such a magnificent smile as she gave us today, I haven't seen in a long time. I think it will be like the Cheshire Cat smile, like in Alice in Wonderland, right? Lyudmila Fedun's smile will be with us constantly. Thank you, Lyudmila Fedun, for your time, your knowledge, and your warmth.
Thank you for listening to me, because with each piece of knowledge, there will be contact between us, between our bodies, between our minds, between our souls. And we will be together. And if we are together, we will be stronger. And as a team, we can go far.